and I'm just wondering if anything at all has changed. I've done a preliminary review of it and done a kind of a very high level mapping of processes relative to the grant process that's been developed. And it looks like it's got a little bit more detail than the other one does, but the other one is at a very high level. So I wanted to understand, if anything has changed, you can just let us know.
Okay.
The question that I had as I went through it, though, your first task was to draft an RFA, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity kind of review cycle or approach that you take to identify different opportunities before you go through an RFA. So are there steps before the RFA draft that you take to get to that?
Secure the funding stream.
Okay.
Get the money. Well, I mean, not as it would relate to the granting process. Some of that background work would include maybe a lit review or referencing a former lit review just to determine if there are any new elements or components that we would want to bring in or emphasize. Revisiting the prior cycle to determine if there were any significant lessons learned or any frequently occurring errors that would prompt us to tweak the application to some extent. Ken, I just sent to the entire group a document that's our 2015 master schedule. That will be important also for us to reference because we have tweaked as you scroll down for these tasks, and I'm trying to scroll down on your screen and, and it's not working. But we have tweaked our sequencing just a little bit.
You cannot do that. No, I'm sorry, Janelle. Yeah. So you have tweaked this one already.
So we have, yeah. So if you'll scroll down just a little bit more for me.
So we do that. If we can just go like one step at a time. Just I'm sorry, you're way ahead of me as usual, but I just wanted to go through it somewhat deliberately so we don't miss anything.
Okay.
From our perspective, you haven't missed anything, but we just want to be sure that we're clear on what we do. Okay. So you essentially draft the RFA, and that is pretty much your responsibility to do and to circulate, and then get probably a review cycle back, right, from everyone.
Right. Now we are I'll give you details, and you'll need to sort of like what you just did, redirect me if I'm going too far into the wrong direction. But with regard to the person responsible, we're now doing a bit more rotating so that I may not be the lead author to design an RFA.
But have you identified anybody that is at this point, or you're still in the process of doing that?
It will rotate. So, for example, Stephen, whom you've not met, is going to be the one to design an RFA that will be a brand new RFA for us to release. But before he does release that, or before it's finalized, so what will change is the name Jonelle. So it's just going to be a member of the CHI team to draft and circulate for review. And then the first sketch.
How's that? Janelle to assign, draft, circulate for review.
Yep, that works.
Okay, sounds good. And those are members within the CHI team, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, good. So then the team members review it. Nada, Bobby, Stephen. Okay, and then Kim. So that's sort of the cycle that you would like to move through. Or would that rotate as well?
That will rotate as well. And I should also, this is a transition for the team. I've just hired our new director of change, and that's Nada. So technically that first line, Nada will be the one to assign, draft, and circulate for review.
Okay. Well, let's do this.
Now, this is Richard. I got a quick question. How different are your RFAs on a program by.
Richard, we can hardly hear you. I'm sorry. You,
Sorry, my question is, how different are the RFAs on a program by program basis? Do you expect to be able to have one RFA template that can be used for?
We're anticipating that we'll be able to have two templates. One will be the standard new application, and then the second will be for continuation funding. We will need flexibility, though, to tweak it as necessary based upon any variation with the objectives or cancer focus or funding level or any new elements that we'd like the application to encourage.
Okay. Have you identified who would be making those changes to the applications? Would that be done or to the application form? I mean, we'll set it up so that it works for whatever the baseline, and we'll try to make it as flexible as possible. But when you start adding forms and fields and stuff like that, there sort of needs to be a little bit of technical ability to add that stuff in to the system.
Okay.
Just trying to, I don't know if that's going to be somebody in the IT shop or just something to put on the radar that may be a need later on.
Okay. Ken, the one thing that I would recommend now, just so that we are not getting too distracted, I wouldn't worry so much about the CHI responsibility column.
okay. Okay, that sounds fine. I'll let you worry about that because I'm assuming that we're going to get a finalized draft from you anyway. But you're right. That makes sense. Okay, I'm game with that. So the CHI team members review the RFA and then it's finalized. The CHI responsibilities, just as a footnote, are important to us because what they do is help align a workflow for us. And then we can design that workflow that helps enable you to do your work a little bit easier.
Okay. I would say the biggest change is going to be for tasks 1, 2, and 3. Nada is going to be the lead. So if you just want to put her name on the first line, the very first one, nope, go up again. To draft the RFA, that will be Nada's responsibility. And then for the next line, I would just put Bobby, Stephen, and I would leave Kim where you have her. We will have to hire one new CHI lead to replace Nada's position, which means there will be a TBD on that line as well.
Okay. Well, let me just put. And I'm not going to change everything here. I just, you're right. We don't need to get involved with all the detail on this. I'm assuming that you're going to again just send us the revised document once we get it. Once you get it finalized, right?
If that's what you need. Sure.
Yeah, that's what we'll need. I mean, eventually that's what we'll need because again, we need to be sure that not only we have the process here and we understand what's happening so that we can design it appropriately, but also what the workflow is going to look like.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you've got it, or if there's any changes that are made here that you think are final, that's fine too. But it'd be nice to have we're going to have a final sign off from you anyway. So then you finalize a draft RFA. And that is going to be you and Nada?
Hold on 1 second.
And then develop.
No.
Go ahead.
Nada. Ken and Richard, now that we have the record, I will be backing out of the day-to-day operations of the grant program. So my name really won't be reflected in this document.
So this won't be you then, is that what I'm hearing?
Correct, that will be Nada.
This is Nada, okay. Whoops. Sorry, Nada.
So Janelle, just in general, everywhere where we see, or most of the places on here where we see your name, we'll just replace that function in the system with Nada.
Yes, and then where you saw Nada's name previously, that will now be a TBD
Okay.
until we hire that person.
Okay. So
Okay.
it's really a person switch, not a role switch, right?
Correct.
Okay. Fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, we'll make, okay, so we'll make those changes to this document, and maybe once we make them, and we're getting a lot of feedback, so I'd like to keep everyone on who wants to have a conversation or contribute, but if you could mute your mics or speakers until you're ready to talk, that would be great, because I think everybody gets feedback. So then develop collaborative agreement amendment form. So there is an amendment form here that you have as well.
Correct.
Is the agreement itself, what does that look like? Is there a special name for that?
It's just that collaborative agreement form.
Okay, so that's the name of it. And then there's an amendment form as well. Okay. Stakeholders review the final draft. Change history recorded. Okay, and then it's finalized, and then you release it. The senior directors are within your organization,
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes, those are the
Okay.
leads for each, for the division. No, not within CHI. They're just within the society, but you can just delete CHI and leave within divisions.
Within divisions. But that's ACS divisions within.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Those 11 divisions that we're talking about, is that?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. And a TA, okay, so you release that, then it's approved
Now,
by the directors. Is that the next step? It's approved, and then
so it's
what
finalized.
happens after that?
It's finalized.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Finish your question.
Yeah, it's released. You release the RFA. Oh, it's finalized, and then it's released, okay, to the potential grantees, right?
Right.
Okay. Does it go on the web then for application
So I'm assuming
by
at
the
this point it's
grantees,
getting
or
posted.
how does that work?
I'm assuming at this point it's getting posted to the Flux system and will be released on
Yes.
the Flux portal for the applicants
Right.
to apply to. Is there a targeted list of people that will be applied to?
Yes. There will be. So this is what's going to change once we implement Flux. Between the finalizing and releasing, the senior directors will need to give us a list of the potential grant applicants.
Right.
Okay.
You know, this will be interesting because the way that this works now, divisions, once the RFA is released, they have some time to talk through and to think through who the applicants will be. This is going. Hear me?
Can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I need to talk through this a little bit because I had not considered this before. In order for us to release the RFAs, we'll need to know who the potential applicants are. In order for us to know who the potential applicants are, the divisions will need to have at least had those discussions to know who is ready and who they would select. So there's going to need to be another step that happens earlier.
Okay. And that is identify potential right?
Yes, and that will be the ACS senior directors.
Okay. And then, okay, that sounds good. Okay.
Now they'll be the same ones to supply the list.
Right, that makes sense. Okay.
And there's another we have just added back. So between the releasing of the RFA and the providing of TA, well, I guess that can be considered providing TA. But technically, we're going back to hosting RFA review calls, which is a little different from providing the ongoing TA throughout the application process. So
explain that. Yeah, explain that a little bit, Janelle. What could you?
At the time that, well, when we release the RFA, there will also be an opportunity for the potential grant applicants to join a webinar to get a thorough review or overview of the RFA.
Let's see. And then who hosts that?
You can put Nada as lead for that.
Okay. Okay.
Is there any tracking that goes along with that? Are you tracking the attendance lists, the attendee lists, for any compliance reasons, or is it just if they want? So do they have to go to that in order to apply, or?
No, that would be optional.
Okay. Is in the Flux system, you have to have these grantees will have to have a count in order to see this, in order to see the application. In the process.
Richard, we can barely hear you. You're going to have to turn up your sound or something. I'm sorry.
Okay. Where in the process is the account provisioning for the grantees?
What is account provisioning?
So if I'm an external grantee, I right now have no visibility into the system. I need to get an account in order to see the RFA. So a login credentials.
Okay. So then I would imagine, Richard, that would need to happen between the grant applicant list being supplied and the RFA being released.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the TA
are you going to list that
is
step?
provided. Okay, where do we? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah,
where would that go?
You need to insert that.
After the grant applicant list being supplied.
Right here.
Yes.
Just before that?
I would say after that.
After it, okay. And the name of the step is what?
Richard, what did you call it? Account provisioning?
Yes, account provisioning. Thank you.
And then who does that?
I believe that will have to be the grant applicants, right?
So
they're responsible for doing their own.
That's something to discuss, right? So either the grant applicants apply for an account, and there may be you may want to have a internal process to verify that they are who they are, they say they are. So there may be an account provisioning that ITs is involved in, because they're actually getting access to your system. So in other foundations, what happens is there's a group. It's either an IT group, a subset of IT that manages accounts on the network, or it's an internal program group that's associated with the app with the program that looks for inbound um, applicants or grantees and says yes, you can come in and apply for a grant.
Richard,
Your
I
case,
would need
Is that part of your process, Janelle?
not right now, and so I would really need to consult with someone in IT to determine if that's something that they view as their role. So right now, as far as the responsibility column, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. Um,
from a
so
Flux
what I'm going to do is I'm going to put question marks there.
from a Flux
Okay.
perspective, it can be either or. Just somebody needs to be designated with with making that decision, and it's really a internal policy decision. How do you want to um, uh, allow people into the system?
Well, what we'll just we're going to put it here, and I'll send you this draft to Janelle
Okay.
and copy Nada on it, and you guys can make that determination, and then we'll just wait for your final sign off on the actual process once you make that policy decision.
Alrighty.
Good. Okay. So are we good from here? We're ready to move on to the next step. Release the RFA. The review of the RFA. Provide the TA. Now, I'm going to ask a silly question, but the TA is what?
Technical assistance.
Okay. Thanks. Provide TA semantic. Okay, very good. And that's throughout the whole process, right after the RFA has been released.
Correct.
Okay, good. And the same with access status. Okay, makes sense. So they're really just monitoring the process and making sure that it's flowing properly.
Right.
That's what it sounds like. Recruit the review team. Okay.
So, Janelle, quick question
Bobby's
about the
involved with
technical
that.
assistance. I remember in the meeting before you said that the divisions were helping the grantees prepare their applications.
Correct.
Is there any monitoring back and forth or routing back and forth that you need between the application and or the grantee and the and the division in terms of sign off or work approval? Or is that just an open collaborative process when the grantee feels like they're ready to submit, they go ahead and submit?
That's an interesting question, Richard. I think that divisions would like to have some, well, they will want visibility to the application. We did decide in the meeting that they would be the very first ones to do the initial review and approve before it would come to CHI. So I'm not sure if there are more steps that would be needed other than just having open visibility to the actual application and then having that initial review or sign off.
Okay, we can leave it open for now, and we can put additional points in there. But it's good to know like who starts the application and who closes it.
Okay, so we would want the grant applicant to actually start the application. And technically, they should have the ability to do the close because even if, so if it went to the divisions didn't approve. Yeah, I think for now, I'd want the grant applicant to have control over when it's opened and when it's closed, given that the next step will be that the division will have to approve. But when it's opened, the division should have visibility to the process, to the application, to how it's being framed, so that collaboration can occur.
Okay. Do you want the divisions to have?
So we've got the
Do you want the divisions to be able
Go
to
ahead, Richard.
add comments to the development of the application, or do you want them to
Yes, that
actually
would be nice.
add content into the application?
I would prefer comments.
Okay.
It is intended to be a collaborative process, but we should not really be writing the applications, and this would help us control for that.
Should this be after they prepare the spreadsheet? Uh,
So
when should we have that review?
that won't, I don't think that that will be necessary, or maybe it gets modified. So right now, because it's a manual process, as the applications come in, Deborah is doing a summary spreadsheet of what's come in, interventions, just key data points are being extracted from those applications and placed into the Excel spreadsheet. So with Flux, we should no longer have to do that manually.
Right. Right, that makes sense. I'm just wondering where we put the division comment option in the process.
I don't think it's a step in the process, Ken.
Maybe up
It's
there where it
probably
says
after the
assess status.
spreadsheet.
It's really a component that gets added to the application form, and the question there really is, does the if the division staff are restricted from editing the application content rather than, so it's not really a process issue other than it's more of a visibility issue.
Well, I
Okay,
don't think that we have the step captured. Could you scroll up just one moment, please?
sure. Is this Bobby?
No, actually, it's Bobby Jr. It's Kim.
I'm sorry, it's who?
Kim. I would like to
Oh,
suggest
Kim. Okay, thank you,
that it
Kim.
comes right
I was able to
above
recognize your
recruit
voice.
review team. Because if the CHI leads are providing technical assistance to ensure that the application is submitted timely, well, then the next step would be, I would think, to actually submit the application. And maybe that's where we can capture that it can be submitted by the grantee collaboratively with the ACS division staff.
So you're thinking after prepare the application spreadsheet, we have
No,
another
above
step.
recruit review team.
Before that?
Yes. See, it says assess status of timely submission. So the CHI leads are ensuring that they can submit the application by the deadline. So maybe we can capture a step where the grantee is actually submitting it.
Well, but we have, we have that the applications are due. So perhaps what changes there is the applications are submitted by the grant applicant. Once the grant applicant submits, then the division has to review and sign off on it. But if you scroll, I'm sorry, Ken, to do this to you, the ongoing comments or visibility to the application, ability to provide comments from the divisions to the application, that's ongoing, same as the TA that's being provided.
Okay.
You follow me?
Okay. Oh, here's the senior directors. Yeah, I mean, you're right. So this is an ongoing process, and maybe we really don't even need an additional process here.
I mean, if
Does that make sense?
Just for documentation purposes, I think that it makes sense to go ahead and list it, just so that, Richard, as we're moving forward in answering your questions, you at least have a checkpoint that states, oh, yes, the divisions need to have visibility, and they need the ability to provide comments. So, Ken, I do like the idea of listing it here for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Okay.
call it division review.
Right. I'm just curious about where we would do it, and I would think it would be after they have most of the data in, right? So it would probably be, I'm thinking maybe right here would be a good spot. Oops. Does that make sense?
It does, but you can also delete prepare application spreadsheet so that it really flows as it will once Flex is implemented.
So delete that whole.
Yeah, they're not preparing an application spreadsheet. They're just because that data is already in the system.
Right.
Is there a
So
need
this one's gone as well. Okay.
is there a need to review that data at that point, or is
What
that
we
is the
will
review?
do, so under applications are due, we'll have the CHI team will need to review those applications, and that could probably be where we would run a report that would give us everything that normally we would have had to do a manual extraction for.
Does that make sense? CHI team to review.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you might want to add in there, Ken, that they need a report of which applications are due, or which applications are, or applications by state.
I can't. I'm sorry, Richard.
They need some
I don't know if it's your speaker or my ears, but I just can't hear you very well.
They need a report at that point as well. So just note that they need a report in the system.
Oops. It's a funny looking report. How's that sound?
That's fine.
Okay.
And I mean, just so that we're
Oh, I messed something up here, didn't I?
Ken,
What did I do there?
that's when you would type in required and you skip down to the next row.
Okay. Do you remember what this process was here?
Applications are reviewed.
Okay.
Now,
All right. Thanks.
go
Back up.
Yes. No, not that far. Just to the line above it. Right. For the applications are due, the the responsibility section. They won't add, so you can delete Stephen and Ada, add relevant application data to master, because that won't happen anymore. So yes, that can be deleted.
Okay. Good.
Now, what will change on the next one? Bobby will circulate, but I'm not sure how you want to change the wording to reflect that the applications are assigned to the review team, so that then the review team members have access to Flux to complete that process.
To review teams. So they're assigned here. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
The review teams are assigned.
Well, the review teams are assigned applications.
The different applications, right?
So
Let's see.
another question about another question about the review teams. How do you go about? Are the review teams internal to ACS, or
yes,
external peer reviewers?
They're internal.
Internal only. Okay. And so we can add a. Do you assign reviews by group or by individual?
By teams.
By teams. So you'll set up a team like Team A. Do you have a bunch of applications coming in at the same time, and you review them, or are you reviewing them individually?
So So when the applications come in, the CHI leads do a preliminary review. Once they do the preliminary review, then Bobby has already recruited the review teams, and she makes assignments based upon the number of applications that come in and the number of teams that we have, and where those internal reviewers are based.
So really, you have an extra step here. The applications are reviewed. Who actually reviews that?
The preliminary review occurs, that's what the CHI leads.
Okay, so this, but I'm thinking maybe this goes down here, right?
No, you
And the applications are reviewed by the CHI leads. Am I getting this right?
So no, I mean partially. So there's a
Oh,
once the applications come in, the next step is a preliminary review. So that should be where the CHI leads are.
so right here.
There's a preliminary review. Yes.
And then the CHI leads do that preliminary review, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then Bobby assigns the teams to review after that.
So there's another step in there, Ken, and that is there is account provisioning for there's development of the teams for the review.
Okay.
Well, Ken, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'd like to, as much as possible, use language that we would use. And
Sure.
I think if you scroll up some, did you delete that Bobby recruits the review teams? Or is that still there? Okay, so we have recruit review team. So
Right.
at this point, perhaps the provisioning also occurs at that time or following that.
No, that's exactly where that occurs. That's perfect.
So provisioning occurs here.
Yeah.
So review, recruit review team and provision.
Yep.
Does that capture what we need?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, let's see. Let me look at what we have there because, interestingly enough, we have steps within that responsibility section.
Right. Right. So she's recruiting here. Revising review sheet. Schedule review calls to brief reviewers. And then circulate review sheets. Does she circulate that with the division, or that's a totally separate step?
So that will be separate. So the division review, remember, that's the very first review. That's when the divisions have access. They can send comments. They decide if it's going forward or not.
Right.
Good. Okay. Then really the applications are due after the revision review. Do they go back to your team before?
No.
Okay.
No.
So they're due, and then they're reviewed again. Is that what I'm seeing?
Right. So that's when CHI team steps in. So the very first review, the division review, is making sure that divisions buy in, that they support. They'll probably have to submit some sort of letter of support at that time before it's submitted. Once it's submitted, then my team does the preliminary review. That happens.
So they do get a letter of support before you move on.
Yes. And then
Okay.
if you wanted to add another line there just to keep track of the conversation, divisions also, this is when they'll have the option to insert comments. And then this is also final sign-off or final approval, whatever the represent that it won't come to us until it has passed this review.
How's that sound? Letters of support required, and then comments made, and final approval from divisions.
I would call it final revision, final approval, because there's really only one final approval, right? There's an approval. There's an approval from division, but it's the final approval is when you're making an award.
Yeah, Tim, that makes sense. What you have here, final division approval.
Okay. Okay, good. Richard, are you okay with that language?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So then the applications are due. Uh, CHI team review and report required. Where does that report go?
Well, that's an interesting question. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's used as a reference document.
Okay. By who? By CHI?
Yes.
And what do they use it to? What do they use it to produce another report or document somewhere down the line, or where?
Well, so initially the way that this was designed, and so this is a good question because it's forcing me to think this through, and for Bobby and Nada, please also weigh in. So typically the way the application summary was, because if we didn't populate it then, or at some point populate this application summary, we would have no working document that we could use to monitor. So I'm wondering if that's even, I mean, that's just going to be an ad hoc report for us, not ad hoc, it's probably going to be just a standard report for us. So I'm not sure that we have to, have it here.
So,
Okay.
is there, sounds like there's a, who is generating the content for that report summary? Is it part
The
of the application?
The summary is coming from the applications.
Okay.
So as we move to Flux, let's say that we needed to run that report just because, Nada just wanted to see all of the applications that came in, sort of get an idea of what the targets were, what the interventions were. We would have that report.
Yeah, that would just be an ad hoc report in Flux, basically based on status and report summary.
Okay,
Does
because
that,
I think
does it
the way that,
does it need to be a formatted report, or is it just you just need the data?
I don't know the difference between the two. What do you mean, formatted
When I say
data?
formatted, I mean it need to be a pretty report that with spreadsheets or with pie charts and stuff like that, or is it just a list of the applications, who it's from, with the report summary and the status of it in spreadsheet
Well,
format, just as data?
so we do need the data, but there are a few things that Bobby does with that report. So because she's monitoring the review process, she'll also, I mean, this is tricky. So there are a few things that we would want. So from the data that are collected within this summary report, we'll want to know on average.
I'm sorry, I'm changing things as you go on. I didn't mean to distract you.
So from that report, we do monitor, like behind the scenes for review purposes, we do track and pay attention to, on average, how many targets, what's the average target, what's the range of targets, so that we also have that working knowledge. But to answer your question, Richard, I don't know that it needs to be more than what we would run an ad hoc report to show.
Okay. So we could we in Flux, you basically would have a dashboard or a filtered card that would have that
Right.
information in it. So it would always be there for you whenever you needed it.
Okay.
I guess the biggest question for a report, thinking about a physical report, is do you have to print it out? Does somebody else need to see it and sign it to go somewhere, like for accounting preparation or something like that?
So we would need to be able to do that, because this sets the stage for, we have to, for each for each project, we have to assign a Siebel ID. And so that would get populated to this typical spreadsheet that we have, this master application summary. We would also track, and so what I'll need you to do as you're hearing this is sort of help me understand if Flux can take care of this without us needing a separate report, because the workflow, as it progresses through each step of the workflow, data point that would be added to the spreadsheet. But I'm wondering if Flux is already accounting for that, and maybe a separate report would not be necessary.
So we'll need to figure out where this Siebel data is coming from. If it's sounds like it's
Is this report being used? You said something about Siebel, that you're actually reporting it to Siebel as well, correct?
No, and I'm sorry, it's confusing. So the application, and maybe I'm overcomplicating this. So once the applications are due, the CHI team is reviewing. So as far as a report being required, we don't need a report to actually conduct the reviews.
But the report is generated from the data you capture at the application process once it's complete.
Correct.
And maybe what we're doing is creating a separate step that's further down in the process on the left-hand column for this report. Rather than capturing it here, it should be a separate line item somewhere else.
Yeah, you're right.
So is that it? So that's basically as soon as you get the applications in with the application summary, do you start setting that application up in the accounting systems and in the various other systems that it's going to start touching? Do you start coding it at that point, or do you wait until you have some additional decisions?
So it would not happen until after applicants are advised of funding status. So it would happen around the same time that Kim is acquiring the funding codes.
Okay.
So way down here is where you're talking a report is required, or
no, they just need data in order to go to the other systems to start making sure that the stuff matches up.
Okay.
I think we need to back up though. I don't think we resolved where to put the steps for capturing the data that we currently include in what we call our master application summary.
Well, Kim, I think what they're saying is that it will be on our dashboard. So we wouldn't necessarily need sort of this master reference document because we'll have access to it within the system already.
Okay, so then that would also mean that there wouldn't be a need to have a step to update it as well, which is normally what we do currently after the applications are approved.
Why are you updating it?
Because during the review process, sometimes data has to be adjusted. But if it's going to be on the time card, there wouldn't be a need to add that as a step in the Flux process.
So just kind of think, let me just kind of put that into my head and kind of process it through and reflect it back to you, and you tell me if I'm kind of taking it wrong. The applications come in, right? The applications are due at a certain date. The applications come in, boom. Mm-hmm. At that point, the CHI divisions are going to review it and say, yep, it's good to move on, right? At which point it's coming into CHI for analysis and an assessment. At some point during that assessment, so at that point, all of your data is, well, your application data is there. Are you doing an initial assessment and then sending it out to review teams, or is it going automatically out to review teams to be assessed by them, and then that data is coming back to you?
There are a couple checks and balances. The first is, of course, when the grantee completes the application, the division is the first people to actually give a type of review.
Yeah.
The division signs off on it, gives their approval of it, and then when the applications come in to CHI, our team gives a preliminary review of it to get the applications in shape, if you will, to go out to the review team. The review team conducts a peer review of the applications, and then they are advised of the funding status. But after the review team does the peer review, sometimes applications need modifications, and if there are modifications, then that will just affect the data.
Do those modifications go back to the applicants to make those modifications, or do you,
yes,
CHI, make those modifications?
The applicant makes the modifications.
Okay, so your change request, so in Flux terms, you'll change request the application back to the grantee to say, hey, there's some additional modifications. Upon review of upon initial review of your application, there are some changes that we think you should make to your application to make it more compliant. Please do the following and get back and resubmit the application. Is that right?
Yes.
When they submit the application, when they resubmit the application, does it come back in through the same channel? Does it go to the CHI division and then back into preliminary review and then back out to a peer review, or is it coming back to the same place that it was?
Janelle, how would that be handled in the new system?
Yeah, it will be the same. So
Sorry, Janelle, I didn't hear you.
Okay, so there's the preliminary review that's done by the CHI leads. If modifications are required, then the modifications are kicked back, essentially. The application is kicked back to the grant applicant. When a grant applicant makes those required modifications from the preliminary review, then the divisions need to sign off on it again before it comes back to us.
Okay.
Okay.
So the preliminary review, just to give you some context, that might catch, for example, the application was not completed in its entirety, even though we may have validation checks or whatever in the system. Let's say, for example, the baseline that they entered makes absolutely no sense, or they have a budget line item that is clearly not eligible for this funding opportunity. So those things would get sent back before it goes on to the review team.
What I heard from Kim was after the applications are due, the division also has another review. Is that correct? Here?
No.
So we have to add.
So the divisions have already reviewed. So the divisions have already reviewed before the applications are submitted. Oh, you're asking if after the preliminary review, if modifications are necessary, then the divisions do another review?
Yeah, they do another review and then they do a sign off, from what I understood, if there were changes.
Yeah.
So are we adding, so we're adding a line here, right? It says division final review or final division review?
No, Ken, that after the preliminary review, the step is if modifications are needed, the application goes back to the applicant.
Right.
Applicant.
Right.
And in parentheses, change request.
Say that again, Richard.
In parentheses, just put change request on that.
Richard, what does that mean?
So So anytime in the system, generally, there's a state, there's a send.
Richard, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Anytime we use the sendback state, we use basically the change request is a change is requested by the program office. Use that button and it sends it back to the grantee.
Oh, okay.
So this captures what you need here, Richard, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then we have the team peer review after that again?
No, then you have the division review. Because
this is a division review. Okay.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a repeat of the one that.
Right, repeat of what happened up here. Again.
Right.
Okay. And then we would have
Then the application.
division review.
Then you have Ken, that needs to go back to peer review because if modifications are required, it's just circling back through the same chain again, right? So that where your cursor is now should have stayed peer review.
But you do have to have the division in here as well, is what I'm hearing.
Right, correct. So before it goes, Richard, before it goes to the review process, to the peer review, the division needs to review and approve. Then it comes back to CHI. CHI then sends it on to the review team.
Right. No, I get that. What I'm just saying is that it's fine. So what I'm saying is, if you change requested at that point, it's going back to the applicant, and then it's coming back through each of those states again. It's coming back through division review. Applications it doesn't go through applications that do because that's just a submission. But that's really a submission point, right? So it goes to division review and then preliminary review, and then it's going onto from your preliminary review back onto the to the peer review.
Or do you go directly to peer review from division review here?
You go back to CHI. So because what we have to do if Stephen sends it back to say, you have $10,000 over budget here, it goes back, so there's a change request. Then the applicant has to change it. Then the division has to review it to make sure it's okay, then send it. But if it comes back to Stephen and he still sees 10,000 or 8,000 over, then it's not going on to the review team.
Right.
So after the division review, is there a preliminary review again by CHI leads?
I guess we can call it that.
I mean, it would be, is it the same group up here that's down here? Yes. Okay. Okay. So we'd recycle preliminary review, and then who actually moves it then to the application review is complete? Who finalizes that? Is that done here?
You removed Ken. You need to put back the peer review. So after the preliminary review, it goes on to the review team for formal review.
Okay. So this is a peer review. Okay.
And that's the process that Bobby oversees.
Quick question: is that peer review? Is that a tiered peer review process, or is it just a one-line peer review process?
Richard, so here's the problem. When Ken is typing, it sounds like you're, getting on a plane or something and the plane is running. So we can't hear you when you're talking, when Ken is typing.
I will stop talking. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay. So I was saying, when it goes back to the peer review, is the peer review a multi-tiered peer review process, or is it just a single peer review process?
Single.
It's single. Okay, so it goes to the group, they review it. Do they come to consensus at the end of it, and then a consensus sheet comes back, or is it just their scores come back and then you do the
You
assessment?
had it right the first time. You had it right the first time. So the team members, they do independent review. They come together to compare notes, and then they submit one consolidated report that reflects what they both agree on in the end.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I muted Ken. Ken, I unmuted.
No, I muted myself because I wanted to type.
Okay. Oh.
No, I think what has also happened. Oh no, I think it's up at the top, not at the top, but on the bottom of the other page. Remember, we had those steps under Bobby's, and I said those are actually different steps. We don't necessarily have to pull those out, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there are a couple of things. So before the applications go on to the review team, Bobby has prepped them. She has done these things that you see happening here, but we may want to pull out, and I'm not sure if we actually need to have a separate step for it, but within Flux, how does it occur? So at what point would Bobby have the ability to refine the review form or finalize the review form? And do we need that as a step?
I think there's a step. So typically, what I do is I refine the peer review form at the same time that I'm doing the RFA. But if that's
that makes sense.
But you
that
may
makes sense. Can you scroll up for me?
I think you should have a step in right before division review. At the same point, right before the division review step you got right there, Ken, where Bobby is basically adding questions, specific questions to the peer review forms, because you're not going to know. You want the peer reviewers to basically be answering the same questions, and after you've done your initial actually, it might need to be below the preliminary review. Like, so after you've done your initial assessment of the applications, you may have specific questions that you want the peer reviewers to address.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that we just started doing as a CHI team, because at some point the CHI leads have got to just release it. But what we have started to do just because of that is also sort of what we were calling pre-populate the review form. So that would take care of what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So what we have here is prepare
Questions for reviewers.
document for peer.
Now, Ken,
Right.
you're preparing a document. You're preparing questions.
But Ken, that needs to go up top. Around the time when we're working on the collaborative agreement, designing the RFA, we should also, to Richard's point, be preparing the score form or the review form.
Right.
Okay, so let's do this here first. Prepare what? Spreadsheet or prepare questions?
Questions.
And that's Bobby, right?
No, that will be the CHI leads. Because
CHI leads?
Yep, they do the preliminary review, so it would be the ones identifying any red flags. And can we mark that as red flags? Because if I see this a month from now, I may not know what that means, because just of the way that it's worded. So prepare questions are red flags for peer review.
Prepare red flag questions?
Yes, I like that. So I need to check in really quickly with the CHI team. So as you hear this conversation, is this all making sense? Are we missing anything? I know Kim has been chiming in, but Bobby and Nada, you guys have been quiet. So far, is everything aligning? Are we missing anything? Because Ken, I'm a little bit nervous because sometimes we delete things and then we have to remember that we deleted them and that they need to go back.
No, I understand. The only thing that I deleted was that report aspect under Bobby. So I think we're okay. I want to take care of your nervousness, but I think that was the only one that I remember taking out and removing. But I do remember that we have to get that report complete, right?
Right.
And that was a report required, and I think it had something to do with Siebel, and I'm not quite sure the association with Siebel and that report, but we were going to get to it later on. At least in my own mind, we were.
Okay.
So I haven't forgotten it, but did we want to put something right here as well? Was there another prepare something for peer review?
It needs to go up higher where we're developing the review form.
Okay.
It needs to happen somewhere after the RFA is finalized. Probably around the time when we're also working on the...
Like right in here, just before?
No, I would say down a little bit.
Yeah, probably there, because if we finalize and there's some tweaks that have occurred since the stakeholder review, we want to hold off until after the RFA is after Ken.
Yeah.
So it's after, okay.
After that.
Okay. Let me try to move this. Now, this is not questions, though. This is...
That's the review form.
Say that again?
That's not the red flag questions. That's just the questions, right?
Actually, and there are questions. It's a review form.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
If you
or just review form?
Just review form, yeah, because there's some places where we may have a question, but then there are other places where they're scoring. So as long as you just have review form, I think we'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Bobby?
Yes.
Correct.
Bobby, we're giving you assignments here. Lucky you.
You're gonna be.
I'm all fully aware.
Okay. All right. Gosh, we're redoing this whole thing, guys. It's good.
No, we're not.
Where were we? I think we had.
It's all good.
Do we need something else here? I'm going to take this out and don't worry, Janelle. I remember where I'm taking these things out, so we're good.
All right.
Okay. So the division review and then the preliminary review, prepare the red flag questions for peer review. The peer review is complete individually, and then they consolidate a report that is submitted. And where's that submitted?
Technically, it's the consolidated peer review form is submitted just so that we're consistent with the language that we're using. And ideally, it would be submitted through Flux.
Okay.
So we would want an online review form that then in the workflow once it's done, it gets pushed back to Bobby or wherever it lives in Flux.
Right.
So Bobby takes this consolidated form, right? And then the application process is complete. Is there a review? Let's see. I'm looking for a sign-off, if you will, that says this application review process is finalized.
Well, so
Well, and then it,
in Flux, basically what's going to happen is you're going to change the workflow um, from peer review to whatever the next state is for the application, and it'll move it out of the review cycle. So that's the flag. That's the process gate that you're looking for, Ken.
Okay. And we need to know where that goes, though, right? I mean, we need to know who handles it from here, right? Or are you okay with the way it is now, Richard?
So it's really, the question is application. I think that's the application is it's come in, it's gone through a preliminary review, it's then been assigned to the peer review process. After the peer review process, what is the next step?
So that's when we determine what the funding status will be, and the email or the message that goes out. That message could be, this is approved as is, this is approved but modifications, or approved pending inclusion of required modifications, or this is not approved at all.
So there's a funding source decision. It's coming back.
Yes.
So application review process is complete. Is there an analysis of, is there an assessment of the peer review? So you've gone out to peer review, you've done a review of it, and you've got data back in. Don't you then need to look at that in order to make an assessment of funding, of the funding source?
Yes. So that happens, you're right. So that happens before applicants are advised. There are some instances where we need to sort of overrule the decision of a review team or to modify that. And so, yes, that happens before applicants are advised of the funding status. Right. So I don't know if you want to call it a review of the review.
Yeah.
Well, it's an assessment. It's a
review assessment. And
it's a determination as to who gets what, right? Isn't this where you actually make the determination?
Yes.
yes, and I mean, yes and no. I mean, there is some other pieces that come into play there. If there's, missing information, if there's gaps, and with some of that, I like the term assessment because it is that, but then it's also moving us into the next phase, which would be ultimately getting to that funding announcement.
So maybe it's funding assessment and determination.
Okay, and then who does that?
Bobby is the lead for that.
Okay. Okay. And is there a report generated to show who gets what and what the assessment determines, or?
I think that's a good place to put that report. Remember the one that we discussed earlier, because it pulled,
good,
including the summary data points. It would include the review scores, and then allow us to make that final determination.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think that, Ken, I'm sorry, I think that it comes before, because we'll use that report sort of as a reference document to make the funding decision.
It becomes, well, here's the assessment and determination. Wouldn't the report be generated after the assessment and determination?
I think it would be generated after the
I
assessment
mean,
or the
what,
determination, right? So like there's a couple, there are
I
multiple.
would think it would be generated after the assessment, so you could, because here's where you review it. So the one review document summarizes combined feedback, and then does Bobby assess the review to generate the report?
You know, I think that we will probably need to generate reports on an ongoing basis. I think that's where I'm getting caught up because, for example, the applications come in. I'll want to see a report summary. The applications go to the review teams. I'll want to see what those review teams scored them.
Oh, I see.
So as far as the reports are concerned, I think it goes back to the earlier conversation where we decided or discussed that there would be a dashboard available. But there are going to be multiple report opportunities across that occurs throughout that initial workflow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect.
Or should I say, not if it makes sense. Do you follow?
No, that makes a lot of sense. The thing
Should we just put an ongoing funding report generation here? Or?
I think it's funding and application. Yep. And ongoing, I think, would cover that.
Okay. Funding.
And the person who takes the lead on that, it's going to vary. So Bobby would
Okay.
to generate the report if it's around the review team, you know, the review and the final determination. But Nadam may probably want the CHI leads to run the report when it's just the application summary, just to see what those targets are looking like.
Something like that. Varies by functional lead. I don't know if that's the best language, but it's the best I can come up with right now.
Yeah, I think that's fine, Ken.
Okay. All right. So we have that ongoing reports. Then the applicants are actually advised of their status, and they're advised by you were saying emails in some cases.
They would all come via email.
So the Flux, so Flux will send out an email at this point. Do you want that to be a workflow generated email, or do you want that to be a?
Richard, we can't. Am I typing? I'm not typing.
You were.
All right, I'm going to mute myself and not type. How about that? And then Richard, go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to say the Flux will send out an email at this point based on a workflow state, and we just need to know kind of we'll need to know exactly what that email is going to say. Is it a preliminary message of funding, or is it a get ready to be funded, or because is that the commitment letter that's going back to the grantee? I guess is my question.
It varies. You know, in some cases, it's you have contingent funding based on the required modifications that have been identified upon completion of the review process. And then while there are some that, while it's minimal, there would be some that would just receive you have been awarded funds. So it does vary. And then in some instances, Jonelle would perhaps need to have a follow-up conversation, or Nada, that would discuss potentially funding status that is a potential do not fund.
Okay. Sounds, in my mind, it sounds like we need a couple of workflow states kind of out there of placeholders for those 3 different scenarios. And
Okay.
and we would route the application to that workflow state at whatever point it was appropriate. I guess the question, as I'm looking at this, is that occurring before you have funding codes assigned and before the rest of the application do programmatic setup and due diligence is conducted? Or is that?
Yes, and Jeff and Kim may need to weigh in there, but yes, because they haven't officially been funded, if these aren't continuation grants, they would need to have a code assigned. But I will let Kim and Jeff weigh in.
This is Kim. Bobby, I didn't quite hear all of what you said, but yes, if it's a continuation grant, I will already have a fund code set up. If it's a new project, I would have to work with finance to get a code for it.
Okay. And so, what point in the process and would you start working on that? Remind me.
Bobby, you were right. That would not occur until after the funding notifications went out. So the order
Yes.
that it appears here is correct. The one distinction that you might want to make, Ken, is acquire funding codes for new projects.
Good.
Now, this is also around the time that we should be acquiring a CBOL ID for the projects.
Okay.
So insert 1 row.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I missed that.
This is also the time when we would acquire a CBOL ID for projects.
Okay.
And yes.
Sorry, I had to mute Ken again. Can you say that one more time?
You have it, so that's correct.
Okay. I unmuted myself. Is that, and I stopped typing. Is this good?
It's good. Now, we are also hiring a data manager, so you can put that person as being the one responsible. Data manager.
Is that in your group then?
Correct.
Jenna?
Yep.
The CHI group. Okay, good. Acquired funding codes. So are we about done with this? Guys, let me just say this. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We are at 11:30. Does everyone have a couple more minutes to finish this off? And we're actually going to have to, we're almost done. We're going to have to recycle again to get through what we wanted to as a second part, the actual monitoring report. But I'm glad we're finishing this up first because we really need to understand the process before we develop that. We will send out another invite for the monitoring report. But is everyone good with another, maybe 10 minutes on this?
Sure.
Okay. Richard, you good?
I'm good. I'm going to have to cut out, run out the door afterwards. I can make it.
Okay. Okay. So we're acquiring funding codes for the new projects. Came to collaborate with finance to acquire funding codes.
Is there a legal sign-off?
The transfer mechanism.
Is there like a general counsel sign-off that is occurring?
That comes later.
Okay.
And after This is acquiring the Siebel ID codes, and I'm assuming Siebel is spelled correctly here. Is that
Yeah, I'm
right?
impressed.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Siebel ID for projects. That's is. Are these next steps really dependent on that, or this is about the time where we do it, and it's not necessarily a a keystone event? Do we
There,
have to get the ID before the spreadsheet is updated?
Well, I think the spreadsheet
well,
will
there's
go
a,
away because the data is already in the system, right? Isn't that what we talked about before, or isn't that the same spreadsheet that we were talking about before? This that would be
Right. Right. So that would be that ongoing, the ability to generate that ongoing report for application and funding purposes.
and I feel like there's a piece missing here, a step, because for those applications that need modifications that have ultimately a contingent funding approval, there's a step in here before the collaborative. Well, let me see here. Along with okay, so we lumped it into one. Never mind. If we're okay with that, this usually for me generates 2 email communications, but I'm just looking at it a little differently.
So help us understand what you were saying. So we've got the application spreadsheet, which is updated.
Mm.
And then we have the collaborative agreements are due.
So this is where we do need something. There is some step that's missing, Bobby. You're right, because before the collaborative agreements go out, in between working with Lori to generate the collaborative agreement and between that and actually giving the funding notification, there's a step that's occurring where that contract is being pre-populated. So Flux ideally will be able to allow us to sort of pre-populate using aspects of the proposal before the contract is then made available for the grant recipient.
So we're going to basically create a document that.
So is this a good place to put it?
So we're going to create a
No,
document
it's
that basically
happening
goes.
before notifications. I'm sorry, Richard. The contract is pre-populated and ideally given to the grant applicant at the same time that Bobby is saying, at least for the ones that are funded without a need for modifications. So you get the email that says, congratulations, you will be funded. Please complete this contract and submit within 2 weeks. That's one email message. Another one will be, thank you for submitting your application. However, it will not be funded at this time. The third one is where there are contingencies, where additional modifications are necessary. So the contract would not be given within that email, and this is where this gets confusing because there's almost 3 separate workflows that occur after the funding notification goes out.
So Janelle, this is Richard. The funding notification, funding notification and contract document that's going out.
But only for the ones that are approved without a need for approved as is.
Right. That contract document is getting generated by Flux, or is getting generated by iContracts?
Oh, I will defer to Kim.
We had been talking about it being generated by Flux because we don't prepare those contracts within iContracts. We don't touch iContracts until we have a fully executed contract in hand.
Okay. So Flux will generate that document, that contract document, and then as a PDF, and then attach it to an email that goes out to the grantee, and then or it'll be made available on the grantee's portal, and then the grantee will come in. And at that point it will be loaded into iContracts. So that's suck it out of Flux, put it into iContracts. Grantee comes in, says, "Oh, I've got an email that says that I've been awarded funds. My contract is sitting in my my contracts file or folder or report, would go in there, would grab the contract, download it, sign it, upload it back to Flux, and then submit it, and then you'll get a notification. What if the grantee does not agree with that contract document as signed? Is there a negotiation that goes back and forth between you and you and that grantee? Or is it a take it or leave it?
Right now, the only discrepancies we normally have or that we'll entertain are things such as the contract should be made out to a DBA, a doing business as,
Okay.
or another entity to which we should actually write the checks out to. You know, let's say it's called ABC Medical doing business as Health Initiatives. You know, so we might send the contract as ABC Medical, and they may come back saying, "Oh, could you make this out to doing business as such and such?" So we will go back and change that. But as far as the funding amount, or the targets, or the report dates, none of those items are negotiable.
Okay. So that process of amending the initial contract document, I guess it basically would stay as draft. You would receive it back from the grantee as these are the things I would like to change. You'll either agree to them or not, make the adjustments, and then send that back to the grantee for
Yes.
signature and upload.
Yes.
At which point, and which kind of, thank you. That reminds me about one other thing. At which point are you setting up the reporting schedule and payment schedules?
We set the reporting schedule up at the same time that we develop the RFA. The reporting schedule is included in the RFA. And our payment schedule is pretty standard. You know, if we're either making 2 disbursements or 3. If we're making 2, the first disbursement is due within 30 days after signing of the contract. The last disbursement is made within 30 days after receiving the final report.
Okay.
If it's 3 disbursements, we send 1 disbursement 30 days after the contract is signed. The next disbursement goes out after they send us confirmation that they have hired a staff person, and then the last disbursement goes out 30 days after the final report is received.
Okay.
So that's pretty standard. NFL is a little different. If they're having a one-day event that we call our Crucial Catch Day, we send disbursements meant specifically just for that special event by a certain date.
So let me just tell you how it can work, or how it usually works in Flux. During your funding assessment and determination, and there's that, and you're basically adding all the funding codes to the application so you know how it's getting routed. You also basically set up a schedule of reports for that individual application and a schedule of payments for that individual application. You can do one or you can do many. And you can also make the payments dependent on reports being delivered, right? So the payment schedule will show, and then on the external grantees portal, we can display whether the payments are due or not, and whether the reports are due or not. And those are decisions that we'll just make a little bit later down the line. That's just generally how it works. So during this funding assessment and determination, there will be a couple of funding source allocations, reporting code, report setups, payment setups for that individual grantee. So that, and you can obviously make adjustments to those later on.
That would be in flux, so right, Richard, and I'm seeing where we're actually getting a lot of the funding codes and things like that down here.
Exactly right.
But you're saying up in this process is really where the payment schedule and things in flux occur.
But so where it says acquire funding codes for new projects,
right down here, right?
Yeah, it's about the same time, right? That you would be building out your reports and your payments for that individual award.
Okay. Well, that's something that we could work out with Flux. Let's try to get this complete. We've got about 5 more steps that we need to work with, if everyone's good with that, and then we can call it a day in 2 minutes. So, hopefully. So we're back down to acquire the CBIL ID for projects, and I'm not sure if I heard the answer to my question, or even if it was that pertinent, but is the spreadsheet itself requiring this CBIL ID?
So the system will require the CBIL ID in order to make it match up with your accounting system, right? So the spreadsheet is just the ongoing data collection for within the system.
So it's okay. So it's just a point in time where we actually can get that ID. It's not a dependency. Okay. Let's move to the next step. Collaborative agreements are due along with any required modifications for proposals. Is this different? How different is this than there was a collaborative report due up here as well?
I think what we were trying to capture there in red, I think, is that we wanted to make sure that the final approved application is attached to the collaborative agreements, because the required modifications should have been approved further up in the process before the grantee received final approval funding notification.
So, Kim, you were saying the final approved notification?
Yes. Let me back up and try it again. Further up in the process, if the peer review deemed that there were some necessary modifications that needed to be made, the grantee would have to make those modifications. The divisions would have to work with them collaboratively to do that. They would have to submit those, resubmit their application with those modifications before the application would receive a final approval. But what happens further down the line is that sometimes when grantees return the signed contract, they neglect to attach that final approved application, which becomes Exhibit A of the contract.
Is that clear?
Almost. I would kind of start out with collaborative agreements. You know, the collaborative agreements, including the final approved application, parens, Exhibit A, close parens. Collaborative agreements are due,
Okay.
along with the final approved application.
So, a quick question. This is Richard again.
Collaborative agreements are due.
Collaborative agreements are due.
Along with the final approved application, Exhibit A.
So I have a question.
Yes.
If the collaborative agreements are due with the application, Why aren't they due at the beginning of the process? When you submit the application, when the grantee submits their application, shouldn't the collaborative agreements be a part of that application?
No, we cannot produce the contract, the collaborative agreement, until the targets and all the other data, all the other targets are finalized. So we go through the application process, we finalize those targets, and then we include those in the collaborative agreement.
So this is a collaborative agreement between ACS and the grantee.
Grantee. Yes.
It's not a collaborative agreement between the grantee and any subcontractors or sub.
No, it's just our contract with the grantee where we tell them we're going to fund you at X amount. Your project starts this date, ends that date, and you in turn will reach these targets and produce these reports.
Okay.
And we will disperse payments as such.
Quick question. We've used a couple of different terms. Then we've used the term collaborative agreement. We've used the term grant award, and we've used the term contract. Do they all mean the same thing, or are they?
Collaborative agreements and contracts mean the same thing, but grant award could refer to the piece that Bobby provides, the funding notification.
Okay.
We normally don't use the term grant award.
Okay. So this is the contract document or collaborative agreement that's going to get generated by Flux and go to the applicant.
Yes.
Okay. And Exhibit A of that is the application.
That final approved application.
Right.
Yes.
And then whatever additional terms and conditions are negotiated with contracts.
Well,
yes.
I have a question though. Why would we still need them to submit an Exhibit A if we already have the Exhibit A?
Well, I think I was thinking that you would have, if your format is the application, we can basically create a generated template document that has the printed PDF version of the application as attachment A, and it's just we would just take your contract document and we'd replicate it with the appropriate sections so that you have consistent documents.
Okay, but we don't need the application.
Or we could attach it as a PDF as well, too, right?
Right. It's going to get generated from the system. The applicant's not creating it or sending it.
Okay.
Right. So I think we need to modify this language.
What would you suggest?
Wouldn't it just end at grantee? I mean, or due after the word due?
Where are we going here? I have collaborative agreements.
We're generating a document that is the official contract document for this award, right? And that official contract document is going to include many things. I think stop at ACS and grantee, period.
Well, but we need are due. So the collaborative agreements are due. Or, Richard, are you talking about this being the step where the contract is generated?
I'm talking, that's exactly right. We're going to generate the contract, right? And then, and at which point it gets, it's going to get signed. It's going to get placed in a place where it goes out to get signed by the grantee. Or
Okay.
is or is this
So
or is this the state? Is this the place where the grantee has signed the contract and sent it back?
I
That's
think
where
that,
we are.
so I think, Richard, I'm sorry. So we're saying similar things. So, but Ken, it means that we need another step here, and that is that the contract is generated and made available to the grant recipient.
And that's going to be up above. We normally include the contract with the funding, with that final funding status, which is earlier in the process than where we are right now.
Yeah.
Does it depend on the type of contract? I mean, you said there were 3 different places.
Right. It depends on the message. Right. And so this is where I was saying that there's the one step that from that one step it branches into 3 different workflows.
Right. But the bottom line is, at some point you're going to generate the contract and send it out.
Right.
So this becomes the step for just generating the contract and sending it out, and however we point to it from the different workflows for the different types of application, we can capture that in workflow based on application type or routing. But so the idea is really,
it seems like these are backwards then. I mean, if the contract is generated and available to the grantee, they're due. Maybe they just need to be switched.
No, I think what we're talking about with them being due is it's being due back to ACS, right? The final signed approved contract is due back to ACS.
Yes, and it's critical that we give a due date because we cannot send any disbursements without receiving a signed contract first.
Right.
And we're contractually obligated to provide the first disbursement within 30 days of that signed contract being being received.
Okay. So is this language good? Collaborative agreement or contract due to ACS?
Yes, that's fine.
First, we have it generated and available to grantee, and then they're due back to ACS.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think what we were saying before was that the contract generated and available to grantee task should occur earlier in the process. So for those that Jonelle mentioned, the 3 different scenarios, we would need to have those contracts available for one of those scenarios.
Here are these scenarios.
Approved as is. They would need their contract attached to that email. And then a little later in the process, after modifications have been made and then the application becomes approved, we would need to have a contract available at that time as well.
So you need one here as well.
No. I don't know. I'm losing my place here because...
Yeah, we're switching back and forth. How does that...
See where you have request modification? Yes, right there. Whenever those modifications are approved, then that grantee will need their contract as well.
Okay.
See, what does not show here in this box would be the back and forth that would occur if someone has to make modifications.
Right.
But I think it did appear earlier in your document. We talked about going back and forth through the peer review and the CHI review.
Right. Right, and there was an ongoing process that happened during that time, and I think we noted that.
In fact, you wrote something like application review process complete, I think is the way. There it is, right there at the top. Application review process is complete.
Right, right. Okay. Okay.
And just because I don't see it, could you show me, please, where the where after the modifications are made by the grantee it is actually resubmitted to ACS?
If I can find it, Kim, I'll be happy to show that to you. I'm just wondering where it is.
Okay, because
Here's a
you see where we...
resubmit right here. If modifications required, applicant required to modify and resubmit.
Okay.
Well, but that's not the final one, though. So there, I'm sorry to jump in, Kim. You're right.
No, you're fine.
I think you don't see it because it's missing.
All right, that's the one I was asking you about earlier. I felt that there was a step missing between the peer review and the application review process is complete.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, because after
So
the
you
peer
think
review, there could be modifications requested.
Well, but we can keep that separate. So what you can specify here is that the peer review process is complete. Because once Bobby sends the notifications, if a modification is required, it does not go back to the peer review process. It just has an internal review or a CHI review.
Okay, so right there where it says application review, change it to peer review process is complete?
Yes.
That makes sense. Just change application to peer, and that would be good. Perfect.
But now to get to that step, though, Ken, you'll need to scroll down. So under funding assessment and determination, so if applicants are advised of funding status, if that requires a modification, there needs to be a step that happens after that that indicates that the modifications are submitted or the application is submitted.
I think she's talking about up some.
Right here.
No, after funding assessment and determination, I think is what I heard her say.
No. So when applicants are advised of funding status, so right where you have your cursor, one step.
Right where the cursor is.
Right. So there needs to be another step. You need to insert a row that indicates application is resubmitted if modifications were required.
Okay. Okay. See step above. Okay. Then if modification is required, then what do we do?
Then the application must be resubmitted. Now,
and that's
wanted to keep
that's
that
on the grantee side.
Right. I'm not sure if Richard had to hop off, but you may want to put in parentheses on that step change request.
Yeah.
Oh, here? Okay. Okay.
Now, and then what happens if a modification is required and they resubmit, then there's a final approval.
All right.
Yeah, so then they would...
Let's see. So then we'll have to add another step here.
Right.
So if the modification...
And I'm going to...
Now, it's coming...
Richard, are you there still?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay.
If a modification is change requested, after it's gone through the reviews, is it coming back to this same place, or is it coming back in through the whole application process again?
The latter.
So it's always going to come in through. It was always going to come in and cycle back up through the same application process. It may be expedited.
Oh no, because so when Bobby sends the funding notification indicating it's gone through a review, it was recommended for approval, but with modifications, when that modified application comes back, it does not go back through peer review.
So it's going to come back, and then it's going to come back in. It's going to go out and then come back into submitted, but then whoever's monitoring that first step is going to basically say, oh, this is oh, there you go. Thanks, Ken. When the person that's monitoring the inbound queue is basically going to say, oh, this was already change requested for additional clarifications, and they're just going to push it forward to which step? Which state will it go to?
So when it comes back in, the CHI leads conduct the review and finalize.
So is there a new state for CHI lead to finalize the application?
Yes.
Okay. So that's two steps there.
Have we captured it here?
Well, there's two line items, right?
Right. If the modification is required, then we need to resubmit the application, and that's on the grantee.
Right.
And then when it's resubmitted, the CHI lead finalizes the submittal. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. When resubmitted? Change request is resubmitted. Yeah. Okay. Got it. That's good. That's fine. That's clear.
Okay. Okay. All right. Boy, okay. Where were we? I kind of lost track of where we were here. Contract generated and available to grantee. Collaborative agreements or the contract are due to ACS. Then the contract numbers are assigned.
I think
Funding is dispersed.
General, if I were to do this document over, I would redesign it because it's not as linear as what this appears, and I think that's where we're getting caught up.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think what we're trying to do is just grab the states. Quite frankly, what I'm going to do is put this into my workbook. I've got a workflow workbook for how it for populating the flux flow, and this will be very helpful for decoding what's going to go on in there. And once we finish this, we'll get this information transposed, and we'll review it in that format. I think is a little better format to figure out exactly what's happening at what states. But this is very helpful for figuring out the overall process.
Maybe what we could do is, Janelle, I could send this to you or Bobby, whoever you'd like me to send it to, and Richard and I can work with what we have here until we hear back from you on what sort of final tweaking, or at least preliminary tweaking you want to do, and send it back to us. So we can work with this document as is, and I'll just copy you on what I have here, and then from there, you guys can take it and tweak it a little bit more.
So can I make a suggestion?
Does that make sense?
Ken, can I make a suggestion? If we take this document, we can work it into the Flux workflow spreadsheet, right, for this grant request, and then we can review it back with Janelle and the team, and then, because I think it will be clearer about what's happening where and how things are going to get routed, and they can.
Oh, after it's in Flux. So you're okay to put it into Flux now, and then review it in Flux with the team.
I'm okay with taking this, transposing it into the workbook, and transposing it into a draft work form with it workflow format in Flux, right? So that we can kind of walk through it and demonstrate it at the same time, and then the CHI team can look at it and say, oh, that's what we want, or oh, that's not quite how we were envisioning it. I think there's enough here to give us a good start on coming up with a process flow that will replicate what they want and what they need. But I just don't want them to spend too much time like massaging this document when we've got a lot of other work to do. If there are
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine. If you feel like that's good, that's okay.
If they're missing
I'm sorry, guys. I had muted you unintentionally. Was there something that Nada, you wanted to say?
No, I'm fine now. It's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry about that. It was not intentional, I promise. So are we okay with that process, guys? We'll go ahead and take what we have here and then move it forward into Flux and come back to you with a review in Flux.
That works.
Yep.
Okay.
If there are any missing steps that you can think of, please identify them. If there are any additional documents or emails or letters that need to be generated at any of these points in the process, identify those and get them to us, obviously through Kanita, and then we can try to insert them in the appropriate places. But this is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. I know that Kim.
Guys, thanks so much for your time.
Ken, just really quickly, I know Kim has identified that there's a step or two missing, but I also appreciate that we need to wrap up. So she'll be sure to include that in our next discussion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, guys. We will be in touch.
Have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.